louder than people. Okay, we will call the meeting back to order. For those that are here, thank you, everybody that is here. I love seeing this council room full because we don't have to worry about everybody emailing and calling later to find out what happened. I love all of you getting this involved. Council, would you like to, what I'd like to do is start with the council members, see what kind of questions you have, and maybe start with any questions that you have for Black and Beach, and then any for Airvac, and then for David, or would you rather do David first so we can get the, what would you like to do?
You decide.
I'll decide.
Pardon? Whoever go with the questions, whoever should answer it.
Okay, you guys be ready. Whichever question is asked, whichever one of you think should answer that particular question. So, Councilor Weinkauf, do you have notes, questions?
I do have a few questions. I'd like just some general questions. When the original design started coming together, was it Black and Beach and then Airvac? Who had designed the vac stations? Was it a joint effort, or did one of you design it, the other one pitch in and say we need to do it this way, or how did it all go about? Can anybody answer that one?
Okay.
Go to the mic.
If you don't mind, to answer the questions, we need you. If you're not at the podium, we can't get you on the recording.
Okay, Black and Veatch was your engineer of record. They're the designer of the engineer. We at Airvac review their design and offer assistance and recommendations to get everything up to vacuum standards approved by the state.
Okay. Second question. Do you know what the design temps for the vac stations were supposed to be with these motors in there to keep them operational as specs require?
I don't think I've spoken. My name's Denny Moss, and I'm engineering manager for project design at Airvac. I've been there about 25 years, so I've seen a lot of these stations go in. I think we provided Black and Veatch with the motor sizes and so forth that we would be using in the vacuum collection stations. From that, they have their own department that sizes ventilation and cooling equipment.
Okay.
Airvac didn't size the cooling or ventilation equipment. I'm not sure that Black and Veatch did, to be honest with you, but someone from them or their subcontractor did.
We did. We do have engineers on staff that did design the HVAC system for the vacuum stations. I was not involved in that part of the project, so I really can't comment on the detailed design. But that is one of the, we have different engineers that seal the job, and one of the engineers was a HVAC specialist who did that. So that was Black and Veatch that did the HVAC.
Can we find out what design temps were? Because these stations are run at extremely high temperatures. And you know what happens to equipment when it stays in.
Again, I really can't speak to the specifics of the design since I wasn't involved in it. I can certainly talk to the project manager and the engineers.
Okay.
On that.
Another question. I know you stated that everything was built to stay out of the weather. Should doors on these vac stations be left open because of the salt air, humidity, where everything can penetrate on the equipment?
Well, I think the short answer is no. I mean, you want...
I know that, yeah.
Always ask a question where you know the answer.
Well, I knew the answer. I just wanted to get it.
Obviously, you have a corrosive environment.
Right.
That's not a secret. It's best to protect equipment wherever you can. And that includes painting when needed, cleaning when needed, washing when needed, and so forth. Okay. Short answer is, yeah, you would prefer to keep the place sealed up as much as possible.
Okay. Next one. You said the pipe had the Reber gasket in it.
Yes.
Is that what we used on this system?
Absolutely.
Is there a lifespan on that gasket?
There may be. I don't know that we've ever had any failures. The Reber-style gasket is a double-lip seal gasket. It actually has a piece of steel, stainless steel, inside that rubber. And if you have leaks in your system, you don't have to worry about the leak occurring at those Reber gaskets. It's at a solvent-welded joint, or where someone has ruptured a line because of construction or some other failure. But the Reber gasket in the pipe itself is an extremely good product that we have had very good luck with.
And I know David talked about, as we went down the lift stations, the pipe decreases as it gets down towards the end of the line. Was this system actually designed as it gets down towards the end of the lines for 10 to 15 people per household, or the 2.1 or 6.85?
I can't answer that question. All I can tell you is what the various pipe sizes are expected to handle, or whether that design included specific properties, I don't know. That's something for Black and Beach or I don't know, somebody else, not Airback.
Again, it depends on which service area you're talking about. The beachfront areas, each lot was designed for that 0.59 GPM, which equates to 6.85 or say 7 people per house.
Right.
And again, the what we call the mainland areas, that was a mixture of seasonal and permanent populations. It was 0.4. That was designed for 0.425 GPM, and that's per each lot. It's not. We don't design for one flow here and one flow here.
Right, it's just for each lot. That's why you designed it.
Correct.
And then the valve pits was designed the same way, the 2.14 and the 6.85. You got 2 coming into the valve pit, 6 people per house. Is that what? Right. So it's designed the same way.
Well, the valve pits themselves have a specific peak capacity of 3 GPM.
Okay.
So, easily you're under 3 GPM with 2, 3, even 4 homes. Okay. Connected. So.
And you talked about buffer tanks, and I seen about buffer tanks. Should the buffer tanks be used on a residential application?
In general, the buffer tanks are there for high peak flow users. Schools always get a buffer tank, nursing homes, laundromats, places like this where they have a lot of water and they have high peaks. In general, homes do not connect to buffer tanks, in general.
Come on, people, my God.
That's all I have right now.
In general, thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Painter.
I took a tour with David the other day of the system, and it was impressive to me. And maybe I'm hoping at some point maybe a video could be made that shows some of these things, that how it is on our island. But one of the things you mentioned, David, and you alluded to this earlier, is as we are constructing new homes, I believe you said that you could take some data readings on the valve pit, the individual valve pit serving that area. And maybe you could talk about that a little bit, on how you have done, what you're able to do, and how you are doing that as we have new construction.
All right, one of the things we were looking at is modifying our development service permitting process. When somebody comes in wanting to build a new structure, if Brian wanted to come in and build a new house, and I'd already had a house there and Steve already had a house there, we would go back and look at the water records on the wooded areas and areas where we don't have electronic meters, to be able to go and pull the records and try to get a gallon per day usage on what the average house used for that pit. And the reason why we were doing that is because Denny referred back to the 3 gallons maximum for the pit itself. And the question that comes back to all of us is, who's going to pay? When I can determine vaguely and roughly a number that what we all used, and then Jeff comes in wanting to build that 4th house, and those 3 have used up that pit, and we can show that we've used up that pit, what are we going to do for Jeff? Is Jeff going to have to pay $8,100 for a new tap and impact fee after Jeff's already paid the assessment fees and the sewer district fees for all these years? Or is that something the town's going to eat, or what? We've got to decide. That's sort of the thing y'all still have to decide on, how we're going to do it and We can give you some flows to determine what is actually going into a pit, as long as the house is already there. On the building permit that we're sort of proposing is, we want to see fixture units. When we had that large house wanting to go on the west end, we contacted Airvac and asked them for their assistance to see what we would need to be putting in there and what we could put there with the size line that we had. And it was a rather large structure with a lot of bathrooms. So we were able to determine what that house did need just because of the fixture units. But we can take the fixture units plus what the water that we know we do use and start to figure out who can we accommodate with the existing capacity of that pit and who we can't accommodate for. And y'all got to decide, is it fair that us three were already in there for our $4,200 and Jeff's got to pay $8,100.
So in using this process, are you, didn't you, I believe you told me that you were also looking at some of the existing ones that, are you finding that we have some potential problem areas already?
The beach, beachfront, some of the larger ones, just to try to see what average flows were. Again, looking at certain times of the day. The last two houses on West Beach, we looked at those, 905 and 907, I think is the numbers. We pulled those, and in a 4-hour period, the 500 and some gallons went through that pit. That was just one house. When you look at the house next door, you got almost 700 gallons went through that pit. The pit worked properly, everything fired, we didn't have any kind of problems, but that did exceed the 3 gallons per minute. But there's nothing that we can do about that. I mean, that is in the ground and that's what we have. So what we need to do is try to look at the future on where do we go from here with what is being built so we can adjust and try to handle it within our infrastructure that we currently have so we don't overload anywhere that we put it.
David, what was the time on that 500 gallons on that pit? How long, was that for 24 hours or what?
No, it was 3:59 p.m. to 7:59 p.m.
So 4 hours.
Peak time.
That was June 27th of last year. But then again, we looked at the, I don't know what the address of the house with the red roof, the big house, white
Red Roof Inn?
Yeah.
whatever it's called. And we looked at it also, and we did not see anything there that even pushed the limit. But we know a lot of people are in that house.
If you don't mind, please, no,
Please.
Murray, everyone in the room, we'll give you an opportunity. We have had time to ask questions. You might have your question asked. Go ahead, David.
I believe, though, that is a non-rental house, that's
But
permanent.
it's a person that uses the house himself. So it did show different flow. Even though it was a large house, it doesn't mean that it used that much more flow than the smaller house. So it doesn't mean that when we got rental properties, it's the number of people that come in that residence. It's not the size of that structure.
If he sold that house and it became a rental property, then it could begin to have as much peak flow and maximum flow as the other rental houses.
But even the 3-bedroom house.
Everyone, please, if you don't mind, don't have the conversations between yourselves because we're having a problem hearing. You'll interrupt.
David, maybe we're using the wrong criteria to determine the zoning on the larger houses. Maybe it should be based on the number of bathrooms instead of the number of bedrooms.
Number of fixtures.
I've always said
Kitchens and baths.
I need a number of fixtures. That's
Okay.
that's what I need. Because some of these houses that you're seeing, they put in 2 kitchens, 2 washrooms, two of everything. And it's not like the regular person who resides here, what their house is.
Let me see if
So when you were speaking, Frank, about the life of the insides of the valve pit, and you said that you gave the figure of 7 to 10 year replacement, and then the slide following that, it showed 10 for one part of it and 15 for the other part of it. And you said that's been updated recently, but does our system have the updated components that are the 10 to 15 year life? Okay. And I was really glad to hear that we've got these capital reserve figures that are going up over time, but what are the major expenses that you know of already that we are going to face, and when?
We already have an extra vacuum pump. We have bought other materials that we have. During the design of the system and the purchasing of the system, a lot of spare parts were part of the AirVac package. Controllers, things like that, rebuild kits. We got so many for each vacuum station. So we have a lot of stuff that we use on a normal basis. Our big expense is oil, filters, those kind of things right now. And it's about $80,000 a year roughly for the oil and the oil filters.
But in terms of replacement?
Replacement, honestly, I haven't looked that far out.
And I think Jeff mentioned to ask this question, but I'll ask it. The issue on the west end, when it was determined that, what did I write down? There was something about it wasn't a proper vacuum.
Yeah, we didn't have enough air in the system to
Enough
make it
air
work.
in the system.
And we corrected that back in October, I believe.
And do you know why that occurred?
Do you know why that occurred? I just know it happened.
Generally, when you don't have enough air in the system, it means that your flow is sluggish. The sewage doesn't move as far as it should each time that the valve cycles and pushes the sewage down the line. Your vacuum system works on shear forces, not capillary action. In other words, you have air moving across the top of the sewage, and it picks it up and pushes it along. Okay, if you don't have that velocity, you don't move the sewage nearly as far down the line. Pretty soon the flow becomes sluggish, and then the system becomes full board, or the pipe becomes full of sewage, solid, not asolid, but full of liquid. Okay, there's no evacuated airspace above that sewage to move it along. So that's what happened in that case.
But what caused that to happen?
I would say that there's probably, it could be a number of things, and it's hard to pinpoint. Maybe there was a leak, maybe a valve hung open. Something got into one of the valves and obstructed it so that it couldn't close. That's a common thing. Next time that valve calls for a cycle, then the valve opens, that obstruction, that toy, that stick, that whatever, moves on through the system, and you're back to normal. That's what normally causes a low vacuum situation and gets your flow sluggish and causes, now David corrected that particular situation by putting in what we call an electric air admission controller. So what happens is that controller reads the vacuum, and if the vacuum falls below a preset limit, say 13 inches or whatever you decide to set it for, then that valve will automatically open, whether there is 10 gallons of sewage in the sump or not, admit air to the system automatically to clean out that blocked line. So that's how we corrected that situation. Sometimes these occur at the base of a series of lifts, sometimes on a long stretch of line where there are no connections to move the sewage along. But most of the time, if you have slow-moving sewage, it could be a hung valve or one that's obstructed. You could have a series of lifts that has become plugged, something like that. But those are the common culprits.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question to your question? Okay. David, with that particular situation that happened down there, as you were talking about total number of fixtures, that was, and we were talking about 2 connections per valve pit on the beachfront. Did having 2 10-bedroom and with the resulting number of fixtures, 2 of those 10-bedroom homes into one valve pit, was that too much? Do we need to look at
I don't think it was too much. What it was is we weren't getting enough air there. And also something else we did, we went ahead and put an air intake at the pit itself instead of using the ones underneath the house. At those 5 houses, the new houses where the pier is. And also where he's talking about, that is where the bore comes in. And that is the reason why they had us put this at a certain location. We put it downstream of the bore. So when dolphin and pelican and stuff clear into the main line coming up, that's why the air is for us to go ahead and take it downstream.
The electric air emulsion controller, how much does one of those cost to install?
I forgot.
I don't know.
Is it thousands or hundreds or?
You can put it in an existing valve pit. You don't have to have a dedicated valve
So
pit
this
for
is
it.
not a big old component that's going to cost thousands of dollars.
Well, it may cost thousands of dollars, but
Well, my next question was going to be, who pays for that? I mean, these homes,
We paid for that. That's part of the infrastructure of the system. It's just like me, if I had to come in and put another pump in somewhere to pull something out of a lift station, it wouldn't be anybody's cost. It'd be something that the town does just for the operation of the system. We bought another one this past month, and she's got the price in the PO room.
do we have any idea how many of those we may need in the immediate and?
Holden Beach went in and installed 2 in their system after everything was said and done.
Okay.
And one of theirs, I think, was a belly or something in the line. And I don't know why the other one was.
Okay.
We've bought another one just because the season's coming up, and if we needed something, I mean, they get them here pretty quick, but they're valuable people, so we need it a little quicker.
Okay. Councilor Medlin, she said she was speech through.
Well, a lot of my questions, several of my questions have been answered already. And I guess my first question would probably be for Matt. Matt, and you and I talked about this at break, and I wanted the folks out here to hear the answer to this question. There was a situation where the depth of some of the valve pits was changed from 8 to 6 feet. And I asked you if that would matter as far as the function of the valve pit goes. And if I'm getting incorrect here, you stop me, okay? That valve pit's going to actuate at 10 gallons of liquid, and it's going to fire at 10 gallons of liquid. So it wouldn't really matter whether it was 6 feet deep or 8 feet deep. The only value to the 8-foot pit was that you could go into the pit with your house line at a deeper point.
Correct.
So as far as the overall function of the pit, it doesn't matter.
Correct.
Correct. Another thing that it would do would be if you had the 8-foot versus the 6-foot, it would allow you a little more storage area.
You'd get a little more storage area. I think I don't know exactly the numbers, but I think the 8-foot is 100 gallons and the 6-foot is 50 gallons.
Okay. So that would be the only benefit to that. And this relates to you too also, Matt. You said that the system was designed for build out of the island based on these numbers that you gave us. And apparently these numbers are low, probably. And I understand how you came up with those numbers. So going forward, what should we look for? And as we begin to build out, especially that lower end of the island, should it be to put each house on a separate valve pit or to build another vacuum station?
In all honesty, I really can't speak to future situations. When we designed the system, the best available information we had, again, was the Yopon Beach sewer system. At this point, you've got 2, 3, 4, how many years of data? 5 years. You've got 5 years of data from your vacuum sewer system. You could go back and look at that and make you'd have a lot more information, make a better informed decision on anything moving forward. I'm just saying, making future decisions based on the information we use to design the system, I would not recommend that. I would look again at the data you've got now.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's kind of what I expected you to say.
Mr. Medlin?
Yes, sir.
Can I answer?
Sure.
A little bit? You mentioned something a while ago that we were discussing earlier, And quite honestly, that's not a bad idea to have a single valve pit package for each of those large structures. First of all, if there is a problem there, they're only affecting themselves.
Yeah.
Okay? Not their neighbors who may not even be home, okay? So, and we do this quite often. We'll recommend for someone who has excessive flow, maybe a commercial business who doesn't want to share a valve pit with another business or whatever. They'll have their own valve pit package. But that's certainly something worth looking at, I think.
Okay, let me kind of expand that a little bit. You can probably answer this.
And we're in the business of selling valve pits,
I understand
too.
that. But you do give good discounts to good customers, right? The big houses down to Old Long Beach Pier site, I think each of those houses have, 10 bedrooms in them? I think one of them has 8 and the rest of them have 10. Is that right?
Steve could answer that.
I think that's close. Okay. The problem there has been, and that's been the main area of problem, if I understand things correctly, David, that's where we've had most of our problems. But we still only have 2 houses per valve pit. Would a good correction measure for that problem, because we don't want that to be an ongoing problem, would it be a good way to correct that problem would be go back and put each one of those houses on a separate valve pit?
It wouldn't be a bad idea either. And in all seriousness, I think that it would be one of my first choices.
Okay. Well, going forward, we're on a learning curve. Most of us had never heard of a vacuum system. And I'll be honest with you, I went on a tour yesterday of our system with David. And first of all, let me say I thank God for David Kelly. Man, he's got more knowledge about this vacuum system than anybody I think could ever have. And he amazed me at how thoroughly he understood it. And I was amazed at the intricacies of it and the size of it. It's an enormous thing.
Yeah.
And, over a period of time, as any mechanical system is used, things are going to wear out and things are going to break. And you've got what we call O&M, operations and maintenance. And we have already made provisions to build a capital fund to take care of those repairs when they start coming. You don't buy an extended warranty for a car if you're financially feasible the year you buy the car. You wait a little ways down the road. That's why we're building the capital fund now for future repairs, because we know they're going to come.
Sure.
We're going to have pumps to go out, and we're going to have other things to go out. So I guess in saying that, from an overall perspective, looking at the whole system and where we are right now, our system is running and doing pretty darn good.
Oh, it's doing exactly what it's expected to do. It's
That's the point I wanted to bring up. I wanted you, would you mind saying that again?
Well, it's doing what it was expected to do, and that's pull the sewage in and pump it out.
Exactly.
And, whether growth here, growth there, valve pits, tanks, all this stuff, that's not speaking to the operation of the system. The system is working as it was intended to work. David can attest to the very few call-outs that they've had. He said on Easter weekend, I don't think they had any call-outs. Very large crowd. So, it's the system is working very well. Now, you folks are going to have to address the growth issue.
Sure. We're going to do that. We're going to do that.
And we can help you with that.
But we've been hearing for the last 2 or 3 weeks, Oak Island sewer system may break.
Well, that may be a bit dramatic. I mean,
if I went and bought a new car today and drove it home, I could say this thing may break at
Right.
some point in time. So we're prepared for those things. We've got people on our staff that know how to handle those repairs, and I feel perfectly confident that we're in pretty good shape with this sewer system.
oh, I think so too.
As expensive as it was and still is, we're in pretty good shape with it.
Yeah, and you folks made the newspaper up in Wilmington today. Did you see that?
Charlotte.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But right below the article about Oak Island was an article about Topsail, or however you pronounce it down here. they're having the same issues, you know, and so, you know, it's not just Oak Island that's dealing with this. You know, everybody is dealing with the same topics.
Jim, could I interject, ask, kind of build off your, just one question? You're talking about the valve pits and the size and having one on each house that are just
Yes, sir.
excessively large. What about the lines that they have? Is that an issue at all, the size and diameter of the lines?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely is.
You wouldn't
Just
want
like
to
a
put,
gravity system, you know, you get bigger as you go down the line, you
That's
know,
what I
as you
thought.
collect more homes and so forth. The same with the vacuum.
so you wouldn't want to put, say, four houses with 12 bathrooms down at the end, even though they had separate valve pits on a 4-inch line. You wouldn't want to do that probably, would you?
First thing we'd look to see what else is on that line.
Mm-hmm.
You're committed to the people who are already connected to that line. Let's see if we can connect more people to that line, or do we have to upsize the line, or do we have to take that flow to another line, another place?
So there's options, alternatives.
There's options, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Can I ask a follow-up question? That
Done.
question? Everybody is having the same issues? I mean, is this, all vacuum
Oh, no.
systems have these same issues? Why is everybody else having the same issues? I mean,
Topsail doesn't have a vacuum system.
We're talking about the big houses.
yeah, you know, oh, you're talking about the big houses. Okay. I thought you were talking about
Actually, North Topsail.
operation of the system.
Topsail.
Okay. Okay, that's all you have.
Could I just back up and maybe address one other issue? And David, we talked about this some yesterday. The odor. And I probably shouldn't say this. Thank you. I will not, based on your judgment. The odor is a problem, but you're getting a handle on that. Some things you've done have decreased that odor, even at Middleton. And I talked to one of the gentlemen here today at break, and he was telling me about some odor at one of the vents, the house vents.
The air intake, it should be an intake, it shouldn't be an outlet pipe.
Yeah, exactly.
So the odor could be coming from the air being pushed back to his house. He maybe have dry traps or anything like that, and the air is being induced somewhere else back into the system. And you could have some odor. When the pit fires and you get that first little bit of gulp, it may expel some odor right there, but not a lot. Middleton Lift Station, the vacuum station odor control is working. The Middleton Lift Station side is not working. We do have charcoal and stuff that we changed out about 3.5 months ago that is working. Yesterday, you were there, and there was no odor and anything there, but we had just cleaned out the lift station itself from all the grease and grime. Our town doesn't have any kind of drying beds or drying racks, and our vacuum truck won't haul the debris that we have with the weight loads. So what we're looking at doing is a chemical inducing, and that's why I say hopefully in a few weeks you'll be smelling grape bubble gum. Last year we went coconut and it didn't work well. This year we're trying a different product, and what it is, it's the same product that Holding Beach has, and they have a lift station underneath the bridge where they have a park at, and it's basically a masking agent, and it sits on top of your debris. And what it is 2 inches of a gel, a liquid gel, that is the smell of grape bubble gum. So as everything rises and stuff, what you have is the smell of the bubble gum instead of smelling the sewer underneath the layer of product that you put on top.
Have you smelled it? Does it smell like grape bubble gum?
Smells exactly like it.
Okay.
Let me take my question to you kind of to another level. I have a house that's on the same valve pit with me. Not really, not where I live, but I'm just hypothetically. And across the street, there's a 10-bedroom house. No, let's say a 6-bedroom house. And it's on the same valve pit I'm on. And there are a lot of people in that house for whatever reason. They're having a wedding, they're having a party, and there's people in and out, and they're using the house a lot. So that is an air intake valve, and there is a negative pressure on that valve all the time. Am I correct?
Yeah.
There's a negative pressure on that. What would cause sewage odor to come out that vent?
Well, we should ask the experts.
Okay.
Expert,
See what he
identify yourself.
I don't know every situation that might occur, but normally you only get odors off of septic sewage. Okay, so you're more likely to get an odor if the homeowner is not there and not using and cycling that valve than if they are active. So the Middleton lift station, now that's somebody else's situation, but that septic sewage there, that's where that odor is coming from, that septic sewage in the Middleton lift station, because it's been traveling through these force mains for all this distance and time. The vacuum system, generally, we don't get any sewage off of the vacuum system except at the exhaust of the vacuum pumps. Okay. So if you get a sewage odor at the valve pit package, it's generally because the sewage that's laying in there, not 10 gallons, but somewhat less, has turned somewhat septic. Okay. I hope I answered your question, or maybe I confused you more, but...
No, I'm not confused at all.
Typically, that's 10 gallons or 2 flushes, followed by atmospheric air. Very short detention time in that vacuum sump.
Yeah.
So therefore, generally hasn't had a chance to go septic.
Okay.
So it's being, and actually you're starting the wastewater treatment process by administering atmospheric air and oxygen to that 10 gallons or 2 flushes. I'm not saying that it never occurs, but one of the things I would look into is that gravity service coming from that home to that valve pit. If you've got a dip or a belly in that gravity sewer, that gravity service, your 10 gallons of liquid is getting to the sump and it's getting evacuated. My concern, if you're getting odors out of that air intake, we keep referring to it as a vent. It's not a vent, it's an air intake. I would look at that gravity service from the valve pit to the home. My guess is you've got a belly in there and you've got some solids laying there, somewhere between there and the home, that are going septic and causing odors. Otherwise, it would be every house down the street.
I understand.
They don't all stink.
So if someone
Realistically,
smells an odor
there's an issue that if you've got odors coming out of that air intake, there's an issue there.
They should call David.
Well, and then David's going to call your local plumber, and we're going to check to see what's going on from your stub out at the property corner to your home.
Okay. But if we smell an odor and Jim smells the odor and it's because the house across the street is not occupied that often and they've left and there's some solid left in it, you wouldn't find any problem at Jim's house, and you would have to depend on your neighbor to call their plumber to find out if they're the ones creating the odor.
So just to make sure.
First thing I do is manually fire the valve at the pit, make sure the sump is cleared. Mm-hmm. Then
call David.
So the number of people in the house across the street and the number of times the commodes are being flushed should not have anything to do with that.
No.
Okay.
That should help.
Thank you, sir.
Councilor Scott, please.
I just have a couple of questions for the engineer, and I think Jim hit on this, but I just want to make sure. The Black and Veatch engineer. We saw the pictures of these pipes, and the yellow was like 4-inch, and the blue and 6 and 12, and the sizes went up. When this project started, maybe there was a 50% build out of the island, or I don't know the exact figure, but did your company take into consideration a full build out of the island for these size pipes without us having to go in there and redo them or make them bigger?
Yes, our design assumed every lot had a house on it.
Every lot or every parcel? I think your design was per parcel, and we have some parcels that had 6 lots on them. So
we went by the available property data, which I believe we got from Brunswick County GIS.
yeah, well, I can verify it was because I asked this question many years ago, and it was designed for connections per parcel, not per lots.
Now, when you say parcel, you mean several lots combined?
Tax parcel, yeah.
So we should never have to dig those up and make them bigger for any reason from what you guys came up with.
If sticking with the current design criteria, no, there would be no need to upsize the lines.
Well, and Scotty, he just said a while ago, we designed at 2.1 and 6.5, you know, so I already said that was too low, so we may have to go back and look at, they designed total build-out per parcel with those averages. So we need to look at total build-out per lot with increased averages. Right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
We designed with average number of people, instead of like David requested number of fixture, average number of people in residential and rental in season.
Right.
And we designed per parcel. So we maybe need to look at in the future what we're going to have to do to handle per lot, because we've got a lot of parcels are being divided into separate lots. And increased averages above the 2.1 or the 6.5 or whatever.
You talking about the number of people per
Yeah.
house? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, one other thing, our design did take into account a peak flow. We're not, you know, I said those are the averages, but we do account for a peaking factor of 2.5, which, you know, you can absorb some of that larger flow. Like if I say, you know, a permanent household had 250 gallons per day, roughly. With the 2.5 peaking factor, your peak flow into there could be 250 times 2.5. You just can't have that 24 hours a day. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
I think so. The other question I want to ask you, and I'm not saying Mr. Moss was being disingenuous about this, maybe he's forgotten, but on your engineered drawings, you had Reber gaskets for all the connections and fittings on this. Is that correct?
I believe so. Not fitting.
I'm sorry?
We had some. I know our specification had Reber gasketed fittings. Some of them we may have given the contractor the option of using solvent weld. I'd have to look back at.
I think probably over half or more from the information I received is that the contractors were allowed to use Schedule 40. You can call it solvent weld, glue on, or whatever. And I just wondered why you allowed them to do that, to change from your engineered plans.
To my knowledge, I mean, again, this is I'm going on memory here. To my knowledge, there's no Schedule 40 on the vacuum lines. Now, the gravity lines coming into the vacuum or into the valve pit, I believe they can be Schedule 40 or Schedule 80 solvent weld regular fittings. There might have been a couple of solvent weld fittings on the vacuum line, but I don't believe they were Schedule 40. And again, I'd have to look back at the designs. But to my knowledge, the design included Reber gaskets on all the pipe, and I thought it had included Reber gaskets on all the fittings. That's what I'm not 100% sure of. I know on Phase 2 we switched to Reber. We definitely switched to Reber gasketed fittings. Phase 1 is what I'm a little cloudy on.
Could you check on that and let the council know later so we can kind of readjust on the estimated life of these?
That's all I have.
Councilor Kaiser.
I'd like to not ask any questions, give my time to some of the audience if it can give them a few answers or a few questions.
I think I had some questions noted out, but I think, David, have we resolved the issue of the compatibility of the connections from the generator to the lift station, the breaker, circuit breaker issue? When we had the power outage and you needed to use the generator at the lift station?
What happened with that instance, the generator had run that morning and operated and fired and everything just the way it was and was supposed to transfer. Then it shut down. BMEC lost power an hour and some minutes after that. Well, the battery that provides the backup power for the transfer switch charges it takes about 3 hours to charge. Well, during that charging time, power outage happened. So what we've done now, the batteries for those have now charged to a trickling filter and a fast charge. So we fixed that by changing out that system. Okay. The generator now will start back up 2 minutes after it shuts back down.
They stated during the presentations they had 2 homes in general are suggested for the valve pits, and you can go up to 4. And how many connections do we have that have 4 service connections on the valve pit? Or is it limited? Is it numerous?
The wooded area has 4, but I'd have to go back and look at the plans and hand count them all to figure out which ones are which.
I don't know if you have to hand count, just kind of, yeah, well, you can get that to council later, just kind of an idea. The vacuum stations, the design of them, and this is going back to the HVAC system, that ours, and I'd have to look and see where I found it, but I saw design sheets, I saw design specifications with our vacuum stations when they were originally 1 story, and they included air handling systems, HVAC systems. Matt, this may be a question for you. In the bid contracts, and even in the bid contracts, they were still 1 story. There was no HVAC systems at all planned into these, and this ties into their showing us their normal vacuum stations that had the electrical components on a higher level than all the motors and stuff. So, and then we put another story on the vacuum stations in 2009, a little over a year after we had begun installation. So how did it happen that way? How did it happen that we didn't get any air handling system installed in it, and we put on 2 stories, and we put the electrical components in behind a wall?
Again, my involvement on the project was primarily from the pipelines and the Middleton lift station, so I can't say too many specific things about the vacuum stations. I don't know as to, I don't know why if there was air conditioning and air handling units in the beginning, why that was taken out. I do know in some cases these pump stations aren't really considered to be manned the whole time, so it might have been something to save cost, just because you don't air condition a building if no one's going to be there.
Well, David, obviously we have employees that have to be there enough in these vacuum stations that the temperature is an issue. I know we heard way early in the design part of this that they weren't supposed to have to be manned, but obviously ours are having to be manned enough that it is an issue.
Oh, well, I mean, if you're the person that's manning it, it's going to be an issue if it's hot. Everyone wants to be comfortable. I can understand that.
Okay.
And Matt, aside from the fact that they aren't occupied all the time, there's equipment in there that overheats because of it. We've had to put oil heaters on some of the pumps now to keep them from overheating. And it also had a negligent effect on or negative effect on the electrical systems too. So it's more than just the personnel.
No, I understand that as well. But again, I really, as I wasn't really involved in that design, I can't comment on the specifics of it.
You know who designed those?
Not off the top of my head, but Alan Reimer would be able to figure that out.
If you don't mind, if you could make a note to yourself to let the council know who designed our vacuum stations, and then who designed the second floors on them in 2009.
Yep.
Okay. David, we're having to leave the doors open on the vacuum stations. And I heard this question from many people. I'm going to ask it for all of you that wanted to ask it. We're leaving the doors open on these vacuum stations. We're in a salt air environment. It is corroding the equipment. We need to install HVAC systems so we can at least keep those doors closed a little bit more than we are. What is the cost of installing the HVAC systems in these vacuum stations as opposed to what we're going to have to pay for the corrosion on all of this equipment and the reduced life of the equipment because of that? Are we being penny wise and pound foolish here?
The 2 studies that were done, Black and Veatch did one of the studies, and then the independent person did the other one. They both came back with 7.5 ton, I believe it was 7.5 ton. I had to go back and look. Units for each one of the vacuum stations. And again, when they're sitting there saying we're gonna put air conditioning in it, we're putting air conditioning in it to cool it to 100 degrees. We're not putting air conditioning in it to cool it to 78.
Right.
So I don't, off the head, know the numbers of what it was. That was 2 years ago when we got the prices.
Wasn't it like 30 grand?
Something like that, in
It
between
was
28
nine
and
would be
32.
270,000, I think is what I heard.
Maybe what we can do is maybe look at that, you know, to bring some information back to council. I mean, how much more quickly are we going to have to replace equipment that is corroding? And how much is that going to cost as opposed to just $30,000 per station?
Well, this 560, whatever it is, thousand that we're putting in, that's for the fiscal year 15-16. And that would be enough to be able to air condition all those stations. This year, we've only got the 50-something thousand dollars that we have. My thought is, I mean, we could come back and tell you, but I'm pretty sure it's probably somewhere in that vicinity, don't you think, Dave?
Between 28 and 32.
Yeah. But that's what we can do. Now, that's an
It'd be okay
alternative
for
if you
another
want to
year.
go for one more year, you know, without this and to go with the gates that we've already got. Or either that or the only other way that we're going to be able to do it is look at rates and figure out some way to come up with extra money.
David,
Call
if you
y'all
had
some
to-
more money so we can get air conditioning systems.
if you had to rate the critical need on the vacuum stations on the air conditioning, which one would you rate the highest?
The first one would be 5, then number 2, then number 7, and then number 3. I mean,
Well, why don't we, you know, a horse eats an apple one bite at a time. Why don't we take a bite at a time and fix one at a time?
well, in our plan originally, we were just going to do the one and see what it did for the heat ratio instead of just saying put all 7.5 tons in all of them, and then come to find out we could have done it with 5 or done it with maybe take more. So we were looking at doing just the number 5 to start with, and then 3 months later see what happens with that one.
Well, that's a good idea.
Steve, why don't you and David work together and bring that information back to council? How much is it going to cost us to do at least one?
And then all the electrical components that we have now, we put all the moisture sensors and everything inside of it to try to draw down the moistures and stuff that's in the electrical components.
Okay.
It's a little disc pad that sucks up the moisture instead of letting it go other places. The guys have been washing down everything. Every 2 days, they wash down the pads, hose everything out. The panels on the side walls, they've got duct tape around the seams to keep the moisture out from going into the panels. I mean, we're trying to do what we can to keep the corrosion out of the components themselves.
One other thing, I know an air conditioner is nothing more than a complicated dehumidifier system. And humidity is a problem in those buildings. Have you looked at maybe using some kind of type of dehumidification in the building itself?
And the report from Wilmington, the guy looked at that, but I don't remember the numbers because that was one of his options that he gave us. So I had to go back and look.
And I have a suggestion that is for, you've been talking about if you have a valve pit and there are 4 connections to it and we discover that there's limited capacity and Brian and Steve and Jeff have already built houses on there and Carol wants to build one, it limits her capacity. Can we not look at the average of these and say that in these areas where you're averaging 3 or 4 valve pits or connections per valve pit, limit the number of fixtures or the number of people or something, rather than having Carol come in at the very, average it out and say, you guys can't have any more capacity than this.
I don't know I'm not the one that picks what's fair.
Help us with suggesting that.
Make it fair for the last person.
It's hard to make it fair for the last person. I think that's most of my, one more question. We had initially, and I don't know if it was done in phase 2, Matt, but I know there were some locations it was done in phase 1, and I don't know how many. We installed per parcel the valve pits with the laterals, and some of them may have had like 2 connections, one on the west side where the valve pit's at, and they ran a connection over to that parcel. Now, that parcel was 2 lots. They installed 4-inch lateral lines because that was all it was called for if you had 2 service connections. But then they uncombined the lots, and now you got to have 3. We have some areas we're having to go in and dig up those laterals and increase the size of the lateral to handle that extra connection that's been created.
You're talking about upsizing from a 4-inch to a 6-inch?
Right. So do you know how many of those are we facing in the future? I guess you'd have to do a study of how many parcels there. How many parcels have more than 1 lot to them or something?
You'd have to look at the as-built drawings and see exactly what went to what lot and what lots, when I say lot, I mean, I guess what parcels have the potential to be broken up.
Okay. David, do we know about how many of those we've had to do, and can we kind of guesstimate in the future so we can include that in the annual budget?
I don't have a good guess for you, but I can tell you on Southwest 5th Street, we just ran into this problem. There was 4 lots. One of them was a flagship lot. Then you got that inside lot on the street, and then there was 2 parcels. I mean, it was the choice of council to let everybody combine all these things and pay $1,400.
Thank you.
And now we ran 1 4-inch line across to the flagship lot, which was built on first. And now he's re-subdividing everything else. Well, now you go back to the parent parcel, paid the assessment fee. This house paid this fee, and now they got 2 $8,100 fees. And the developers come in and say, here's parcel number XYZ. And then the new lots are 01, 02, or 03. Well, we tried to assign the parent parcel, kept the assessment. Well, that's not necessarily what Mrs. Smith wants. Mrs. Smith wants lot 3. Well, Mrs. Smith comes in and says, this is my assessment over here, and I don't have a pit for it. The pit was over here on lot 1.
This has caused more problems. This is one reason our county is what it is right now, because of these lots that were combined, and now they're coming back and splitting them off, and it's cost us a lot of money,
Now, Ms. Smith, do we give her the credit of $4,200, or we make her pay $8,100? We usually give her a credit, and now we're going to charge lot number 1 when they sell it, the $8,100.
And then the other person comes back and they're angry about it, and that rightly so.
So I've got a cost of a pit that I got to put in for Mrs. Smith now, but I don't get back.
Right.
I float for many years, who knows how long, until Mrs. Smith sells lot number 1, and I charge that person a tap and impact fee.
It's been a mess.
I'm floating money.
Brian, is there any way that we can say your original parcel,
The first one that.
the parcel number, whatever that happened, the parent parcel, can we determine a parent parcel so that assessment can be applied to that?
Well, the other thing we see is if the person sells it all together and Mrs. Smith doesn't keep anything, then the county gives us a new parcel number to start with. So there is no more parent parcel.
Oh.
See, and the county doesn't notify us when these things are split off either. It used to be when any subdivision with the state, anytime any property was split, they would have to call that a subdivision, no more. Now, 4 is the subdivision, 4 lots. So you don't get any notification or anything else.
Oh.
So that's what we deal with on a daily basis.
Daily
Just trying to
basis.
figure out who gets what.
And when you're having to install these extra laterals, the upsized laterals and the extra valve pits and all that, that's infrastructure. It goes into the kitty, and that's where you determine each year about how much you're going to have to do with that, and that's where a portion of some of our rates come from. It's because that is
See, the FFE was based on a certain number of parcels of property.
Right.
And when these things were being combined, that's like taking $4,200 per times all the ones that were done, which exacerbated the problem even more.
So, I mean, we can't go back and unring the bell. We can't reassess redo the assessments, but what we can do is plan on all of these additional costs because we didn't assess by lot. We only assessed by parcel. And it's going to cost us some money.
A lot.
Okay. I had said we were going to adjourn at 4 o'clock. It's 4:10. Would council like for me to give 20 minutes and see if I can find somebody out here that has a question that we haven't already asked.
Madam Mayor.
You had raised your, please.
Madam Mayor, I would like to ask for a consensus, or I'll make a motion. I don't think I've ever seen so many people come in the middle of the day, and I think they deserve to ask the questions they want. I'd say 5 o'clock at least.
5 o'clock, okay.
You making a motion?
She said
Oh, no,
okay.
you don't need a motion for that.
Okay.
If no council member makes a motion to adjourn, we won't.
And we'll go to 6 if we need to. Y'all are here.
Put on my suit.
Okay, either way.
I gotta come as is.
Well, my question is for David, Madam Mayor. I got most of my questions answered through the discussion. I want to thank you for having such good. I would like to hear Black and Veatch's answers to you on engineering that does know what they're talking about in electrical and all. But David, do you see yourself having to have more people in your department to handle calls in the upper periods? Like this summer. I mean, I noticed 2 vacuum pits open this morning on the way here.
You're asking a department head if he wants more employees? He's like, oh, yeah.
No, I mean, you said we could ask them.
Oh, well, that's a good question. Yes, we do need some more help. We're doing what we can with what we have. And this year we have finally made the turn on trying to get ahead of some things that we've been trying to get ahead of. What he saw today was we're going through timing some pits. We lost some vacuum, or we lost some air on a certain line that we're going back trying to recoup. While they were doing that, we had a water main break on Dolphin today, on Yacht. We also had a problem at Fish Factory plant. Our current staff is 3 people. And it takes care of all 9 vacuum stations, 36 lift stations, and about 200 miles of pipe. And the answer is yes, but can we afford it? That's something else we got to look at. The only way for us to afford things is to go up on rates or some other way to get the money back. So I don't know how council would feel about that.
One thing, Mayor, you might want to explain about the difference between the enterprise fund and general fund, that we can't mix the two.
Yeah.
That's where the money, that's what he's talking about with that.
Well, Steve said, in our budget, the wastewater system is an enterprise fund. Everything with our wastewater system and our water utilities is paid through an enterprise fund. That's your utility bill. None of your property taxes pay for any of this. We're already facing another 11.75% increase in all of your utility fees, water, sewer, and usage. So as we face having to add more employees, as we face having to handle HVAC units, if we add those amounts to the budget, then that 11.75% increase is going to have to go up as a ratio to what we add. That 11.75 is just keeping us on the edge of meeting our bond covenants. With our bonds, we have agreed to cover our operating expenses by a certain ratio, and it's at least a 1-to-1. We're going to produce the same amount of revenue as we have operating expenses. And we're on the skinny edge. This budget year, they thought we'd probably be at 1.05%. So, yeah, council can look at what we need to add as far as personnel, but please understand and help us get the word out if we have to increase the utility fees. So, and one other thing I'd like to say, and I was told this years ago, we've been talking about the vacuum, the valve pits firing and that sort of stuff. Everybody has these valve pits outside your home. They fire, and they're usually set to fire about 10 seconds or so. No? How many seconds?
No, 4 to 5.
4 to 5 seconds, okay?
You're running 10 to 15 calls.
Yeah, if you hear them running more than 4 to 5 seconds, or if you hear them running 10 to 15, 20, 25 seconds, call David and let him know, because they need to check that valve pit. Also, I ran into the situation, we have a valve pit that's connected to my neighbor and the neighbor across the street, and I knew neither one of them was home, but that valve pit was firing. So call them and let them know, and we called the neighbors, and turned out she had a water leak in her house that was going into her sink. So her valve pit was firing away. So if you hear those valve pits, call somebody. All right.
Mayor, just a comment right quick.
Please.
Just for interest, there is another position for that department in our budget that we'll be dealing with in June.
On the water side.
On the water side.
Well, it's still in your department.
You mentioned the enterprise fund. Mr. Kelly or anyone who works for him, they don't get paid through the enterprise fund. Isn't that a town employee?
Yes, they do.
His pay is from the enterprise fund?
Yes. All wastewater and water department employees get paid their wages, their benefits, every cost for them, unemployment, workman's comp, everything is paid through your water and wastewater fees. All. It's totally separate. Police, fire, administration, those are your property taxes. Never the twain shall meet. We cannot mix the two.
Is there a warranty on the air vac system, and did we purchase it?
I think I can answer that. Yeah, go ahead.
There was a warranty that came with the vacuum system. As far as the station components, I think it's 1 year, and the valve pits.
Valve pits, I believe, were 1 year. Breathers and valves were 1 year.
2 years.
2 years.
That's all in your bid documents.
Pardon?
That was all in the documents.
Yeah.
Just
And I can answer that question because I've asked that question before. By the time we started at the system, most of the components were out of warranty because it took so long to get it installed. But and yes, we had the option of purchasing extended 3-year warranties, but the council at the time decided not to do that. But as you heard, I mean, their equipment is working fine. And we haven't had any or many issues that we've had to worry about air vac equipment not functioning the way it was supposed to.
Well, the vacuum stations.
Vacuum stations, breathers and valves, the valve
Vacuum
pits.
stations, we had one filter that we found out that we needed to clean and replace last year. We had a heating issue inside, as we all know about. And after we replaced that and started cleaning that one filter, it helped cut down on the run times and has helped some with the heat just because we don't have the run times. As far as the other components inside, we haven't had any kind of problems with the sewage pumps or the vacuum pumps. We had one sewage pump that we had to pull because it clogged. I think it was a queen size sheet or something had gotten stuck in it. You'd be amazed at what can come to you.
Yeah.
But, no, we haven't had any problems on the outside stuff. We had a few that were during installation. Some of the pits, well, only not some. 2 of the pits that we have found had cracks in them, and what they had is they kept pulling the water and stuff in the bottom, and they were fiberglass, and finally at the bottom or the little cap at the end of it finally imploded or whatever and came up, and then the pit started sinking into the ground, so we replaced that. But that was something small.
That was out of like over 7,000 valve pits. We've had it, and
well, we only had a problem with 2.
yeah, and anytime you've had issues, you call AirVac, and they've been there to.
We call Denny every time. We call Denny if we were adding pits or something throughout the system. We're going to call him, and he's going to look at the lines and tell us what we can and can't do.
And how much do you charge to come to?
We don't charge. One of the things I'd like to impress upon you is to keep good records, because we need to know where this growth is, and then we can put it down. And if you call us up again and say we're going to put a house at 68400 Island Drive, then we can tell you, well, there was been 2 or 3 added to this line. You have capacity, or you have this much capacity, and so forth. And we do keep good records of each of your systems, not just Oak Island, but other systems as well. So
I didn't realize that. That's good to know.
And there's no charge for Denny services for reviewing that. If we send a field guy down from Indiana to assist, then there may be a trip charge and charge for that guy. But as far as that's what we do all the time.
Engineering, that's figured in the cost of the equipment and so forth.
Good.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I would like to ask everybody in this room, especially these guys, But the cost of this thing continuously going up, is there any way I could reattach my septic system that was working perfectly good?
You can. If you do, don't tell nobody. That is another issue. We have about 1,500 homes that have not connected to the system. And we haven't had much problem with that because, we can't tell any difference. But our other customers on the Southwest Brunswick facility are fussing because that facility, economies of scale, they designed it so that the amount per 1,000 gallons is lower with the more flow that you have going through that system. Now, Oak Island is not sending the amount of flow that it should. So the other customers are having to pay more per 1,000 gallons. We are too. So they're looking at ways, they're finally getting the GIS data and everything matched up on those that pulled permits, their plumbing permits to hook up, and those that haven't. And David and John Michaud, I think you're here, they've been working hard on getting that information so they can go to those homes and say, you must hook up to this system. It is by law. It's the health department rules, isn't it? That's not just town rules.
Madam
State.
Mayor, Madam,
Please.
you might want to make the point, though, that even if they haven't hooked up, they're still being billed.
Oh, yeah.
As if they were hooked up. They're
Right.
just not using the capacity.
If you had not hooked up, you would still be being billed the full bill as if you had hooked up. Yeah, it is. Anybody else? Oh.
No, that's all right. My concern really wasn't so much that our sewer system wasn't working. My concern was what's going to happen to the growth to the system. And I'm still not quite clear on this, and I tried to ask the question. If they have estimated 7 people per house, per parcel, but let's say per house, and the size of the typical buildings that are going in now are going to get you from 14 to 20 people per house, isn't that going to have an impact? And this isn't only on the houses that are built on empty lots. This is going to happen when they start tearing down all the oceanfront lots that have the little houses on them, and they replace them with these larger homes. That's the problem that I foresee, and is that not a problem? Without spending extra money to refit the system.
Without spending extra money, that's the... They would not be able to dig up that road. That belongs to the state. But we talked about a few minutes ago, as we're having to increase these pipe sizes for the laterals, as we're estimating build out with our financial advisors, with Doug Carter, we're going to have to adjust our estimates on total build out of the island and the total amount of flow, the capacities, everything. Correct, David? And we're going to have to increase that when we project into the future.
That's right. And Matt, he described how everything was designed currently and what we have within the system now. But you're right, when you start adding 15 instead of 7, things start to multiply. But you look at it, I had somebody come in the office the other day and sort of upset, and they sort of explained to me, well, I used to live in Charlotte, and so did I, and we saw growth in Charlotte all the time. Well, where I live, they put in a sewer system when I was a child, and then when I was about a teenager, the city of Charlotte came through, tore up everything in our backyard, laid additional pipe because they decided to go get the neighborhood next to us. And so the town did look at ultimate build out of the town, and so did Charlotte back in the day. But everything's going to grow, and we're going to have to figure out how we can accommodate the system within. But everything that we do, according to the vacuum station, as Matt described, we have a lift station that leaves the island. So everything that we do backstation-wise, we're also going to have to do at Middleton Pump Station, because that's ultimately the capacity that holds me. Because if I can produce it on the island, I've still got to be able to pump it to West Brunswick. So it's a whole infrastructure we'd have to look at, not just the vacuum stations.
Or your control growth.
Yes, ma'am.
Hold on just a moment, Marie. You've been raising your hand for several questions.
Mr. Medlin raised the issue, I think, of some valve pits, the depth being changed from 8 feet to 6 feet. And I'd like to understand why that was done, and is it possible to find out where that was done?
I can kind of give her, again, that's when that lateral issue came up in the fall of 2008. And there were about 1,500 or so, from what I remember, valve pits that were changed from 8 feet to 6 feet. Now, this was when the engineers were not involved with the beginning of the installation of phase 1. The only problem that caused was in some locations, the valve pit was too shallow to go across on the water lines. The reason given at the time was that it would reduce the cost of the system by about $200,000 to $250,000, because of course the 6 feet valve pits don't cost as much as an 8-foot valve pit. Hindsight is 20/20. I mean, we all can second guess. I have seen records that we paid quite a bit more to resolve that lateral issue than we saved in reducing the depth of the valve pits. And also on some of the homes, and I've seen this, several instances of this. Excuse me, I can't talk today. I washed my mouth and can't do a thing with it. The fall from the home. An 8-foot valve pit is lower, and you have to have a certain amount of fall, certain degree of fall. It's X number of inches per every 8 feet or something. My own particular house, man, we squeaked by. We were within a half an inch of not having enough fall, and they would have had to have come in and put in an 8-foot valve pit for us to get that fall. You didn't have enough fall? All right, well now, wait a minute. What you just said, you had to bring your...
Where the connection comes and turns horizontal, of course, it can't be horizontal, it's got to be at the slope, is out of the ground.
It's above ground because to get the slope to the valve pit, which is probably too shallow, you know.
So you had to come up and go out to get to...
10 foot, the pipe comes out of the ground.
Did your plumber pull a permit to do that? But the permit, the installation was approved at the valve pit. Okay. The remedy, I believe, could be given to you by David. And David, if you don't mind, get with them on that particular issue of their pipe having to come out of the ground to get enough fall.
She got an address?
Pardon?
Address?
Yeah, let them give that to you. Yeah. No, there were quite a few. Right. There were quite a few that had to have deeper valve pits installed after the system was completely installed because they couldn't get the fall. You get with David on that one.
Okay. You had said that if the developer now wants to put in a bigger house, and we have to change the lines and the valve pits, and I'm not an engineer, but seemingly we have to do this. The town has to. So who pays? We do? So we are paying for a developer to build a bigger house?
No, two-phase question. Two-phase question. What did we say a few minutes ago? Controlled growth. If we limit the growth of these mini motels, if the council decides and they can work out some solutions with David and the engineers on, and the attorneys, always got to get the attorneys involved when you start limiting property rights, so that we don't have a valve pit installed with 2 houses that have 8 bathrooms and 2 kitchens and swimming pools and all this stuff. We already have installed with the averages of 2.1 people and 6.5 that was designed into the system. So you can't limit, okay, in my IMHO, in my humble opinion, those averages were way too low. They should, in Oak Island, a tourist town with retirees, I don't know where they ever came up with those averages. Population and homes in Oak Island, that just didn't work. Same way they came up with parcels and lots and so forth. But, yes, that is something we're going to have to deal with in the budgeting in the future because that is infrastructure. If you provide a utility, you have to provide that utility for all, and all have to pay for infrastructure. If it is to benefit you only you. Like when you divide a parcel into 2 lots and one of them has construction on it, you have to pay the $8,100 tap and impact fee rather than the original $4,200 assessment because you're going to build another house there. But if your current house is 7 bedrooms and they didn't install the proper infrastructure to handle your flow, that's part of the overall infrastructure. And that's part of what David was saying a while ago. Every year they've got in the budget, in the FFE, the financial feasibility evaluation, a certain amount of money for issues such as this. Now, some of it is already included in that 11.75% increase you're going to all be facing as of July 1st. There's going to be another 11.75 increase in the fiscal 2016 year. Get that word out. It's July 1st of 2015, another 11.75 increase. Now, with what Doug Carter looked at, after that, the increases would not have to be but about 3%. But that's before we start talking about all of these, the dollars we're going to have to spend to upgrade these vacuum stations and these bigger ticket issues that should have been put in the first place. All utility fees. Your water-based charge, your sewer-based charge, your water usage, and your sewer usage are all going to go up July 1st by 11.75%. And that is so we can meet our bond covenants. Please.
Let me comment on something you just said. In the event a developer or homeowner or builder, whoever wants to build a house that's going to create an extra load on the sewer system or on the valve pit that's available for them to connect to, we can require a buffer tank to be installed. And that is included in the cost of construction. That is not something the town pays. Am I correct, Mr. Kelly?
Basically, everything that we're being addressed is going to need to be discussed on the 28th when we start talking about fee schedules.
Well, I know of one case where that's true, where that was true, where the man that was building the house was going to pay for the buffer.
Yeah, the West End, we had looked at it, we had talked to Denny and them, and we came in with a dual buffer tank. Just cause, yes, it is a residential construction, but it's like a mini motel. So we looked at the flow, and what the flow required was to have the dual buffer tank.
Yeah.
But that did not address the question of whether a dedicated valve pit would be required for a 6 or 7 bedroom house.
No,
where you got a line of 6 or 7 bedroom houses.
That's a decision that council's going to have to make, and that what we incorporate into the fee schedule, just like we have now.
Right.
If a person comes in now and pays a tap and impact fee, and they're on a re-subdivided lot, I want to put a tap in. When I put that tap in, I want to put it in to accommodate the other 2 lots across the street. At some time, we're going to recoup our costs for all that work because eventually, hopefully, somebody will build on those other 2 lots. And what we're still using during that is the capacities that was given for those parcels during design.
Let's see, Madam Mayor, can I speak? Because Madam Mayor's not up here. She's over here. In any event, yeah, that's on the agenda for tonight on how the board would like to proceed with these large homes like that. So that'll be up for discussion.
But my point is it's not necessarily been determined that's something that we, the taxpayers, are going to pay for. That decision has not been made. I just took issue with something the mayor said, and I know that's dangerous.
It'll be determined on whether it's overall infrastructure or something that benefits them because they want to do something over and above the design and the capabilities. Right? Okay.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to point out that at the special assessment roll public hearings, it was pointed out that the state statute on special assessments does not allow tax parcels to be used for assessments. You have to use lots. And my question is, can Airvac model our collection system to show us what the maximum customer flows that we need to regulate our property use for? And to get good information for that model, should we finish the setup and validation of the wastewater system instrumentation capability?
That will be, that's a duty of your design engineer of record, which would be Black and Veatch. We'll be happy to assist and review and look at capacities to assist them, but that goes to your engineer of record, which is Black and Veatch.
You guys don't have a general modeling system?
Well, we do. I mean, we model all the systems when we look over their design and any other engineer's design. We model every line to see that it meets the recommendations of Airvac. Whether there's capacity in the system is a little bit more difficult to answer. Well, yeah, I've got to know what the use of each lot is almost. Zoning and a lot of things come into play.
And Madam Clerk, I forgot to ask you whether we needed to ask the people to state their names and address, but you can just put public question.
If I know the name, I'm using it, and otherwise
Okay.
I'm just putting citizen.
Christine Keelan. My question is what my two neighbors here have said about the large houses. However, I have a different opinion on that, which is we have small houses across the street from us, and there's at least 20 people in one of them right now. And it's only a 3 or 4 bedroom house. So it's not just the big houses. They pile them in everywhere. So to answer your question, I don't know if it's just about counting fixtures, because they only have, I know they have 1.5 bathrooms in that house. And they have 1 dishwasher and 1 sink. So it's not about fixtures. There's just a lot of people in there. So this number of 7 people per house, yes, a bigger house can have more people in it, but trust me, they're crammed in the little houses just as much as the big houses.
And that we understand, and council may have the opportunity or the ability to limit occupancy based on the number of bedrooms, like we require X number of parking spaces per bedroom. But what are you going to do? One of our policemen going to go and knock on their door at midnight and say you have a limit of 12 and you've got 20 occupancy? You can't control it. There's no way of controlling it. Well, there is no system existing that you can account for every single separate circumstance. Yeah.
So what you asked, you said there was 1.5 bathrooms.
Pardon?
She said there was 1.5 bathrooms.
1.5 bathroom with 20 people.
There's only 1 toilet. The Airvac pit's designed for 3 gallons per minute is the maximum flow. So if there's only 1 fixture that can flow to that at a time, all 20 people can't. But what you say, but what she says is correct.
And they are being billed for that too.
If there is a backup in my system, if there is a backup in the system and it flows back into my home, one, I'm going to call you, David. But number 2 is, who's covered for that if it was caused by the town? Is my insurance company responsible, or is the town's insurance company responsible?
And David, I would like to preface that add to that question, please. How many instances would there be that the town's equipment would cause a backup into the person's home? Don't we have check valves or something?
They have a check valve on their side
on public water systems.
But anything could break down at any time. And we have put wastewater into people's houses. But any time it's ever happened, the lady that we refer everything to is Kathy Harville, because she handles our insurance claims. And Kathy would contact our insurance company. She gives their information. And then she starts the negotiation between the insurance companies to figure out if it's a homeowner's issue, if they caused the problem, or we call the problem. But we usually, as soon as it happens, we start a claim on our side, just in case it is something of ours, so we can get whatever's restored back to the customer quicker.
Oh, good deal. Okay. Yeah, let me let him ask a question, if you've already had 2.
I think I understand that the size of these houses, these larger houses, or a situation like this lady's talking about, there's 20 people in a house. Is this system set up so that it monitors how much each house puts out? How much what?
You mean daily, monthly?
How much goes out?
I
Just
don't
your water
know.
bill, but now I'm talking about the sewer bill.
I don't know how much, I go by your water bill. That's
Yeah,
how
you
we
go
pay
by
for
the
sewer.
water bill. Lord, I'm watering a lawn or something. That doesn't have nothing to do with the
It
sewer.
has nothing to do with the sewer system.
That's right. Does this sewer system
The
have
sewer
anything
system-
to check how much goes out of each house?
Out of each house? No.
It should.
Hey, Josh.
You could monitor how much went through each valve.
Now, all right, to answer your question, you can have a separate meter for irrigation water that does not get billed sewer, just water only. There is no way that I know of that we could design this so that my house, if I run water and I use water to give my dog something to drink, that I'm paying for sewer on that gallon of water that I just gave to my dog. Is there any way for us to monitor how much is?
I don't think there's any way you can monitor how much sewage a house produces unless it's the only house on that valve pit package. We can monitor how much goes through that pit package.
Who aren't using all of that in that system.
Are you saying we could develop in the future a way to bill for what goes through the water meter and then bill for what goes through the valve pit?
That's a job for the council. I mean, we can give you a good idea how much goes through that valve pit. We have cycle counters that we can install there that would count the number of cycles, but
That would only tell you how much went through that pit and not how much was mine and how much was my neighbor's. Can we put any meters between the house connection and the valve pit on my house? Okay.
there's no way to do that. Even on a gravity system, I don't know of any system that would have that.
I think we looked at that long and hard when we were designing the system. There was just no way. Yeah.
There's no way you can.
Okay. Yep, hold on. Let me get the mic over there so they can hear you.
I think that's just.
I understand that tanks can be installed for an individual oversized home to catch the storage. On our current system, how many tanks can be installed in what footage? In one line?
You're talking about the valve pit packages?
Buffer tanks. In the separate areas, service areas, how many buffer tanks can be installed for each of these service areas that goes to the
There is a
vacuum
limit
stations?
as to the number of buffer tanks that are allowed on the system.
So we can deny someone that right.
Well, that's your choice.
Can you get the information to David, number one, on the limits on our system, and is it the system overall, or is it each different vacuum station? Get him that information. And it'll be different for each one, and it may be a simple matter of what we were talking about a while ago. If you have Steve needs one, Jeff needs one, and Carol needs one, and we have a maximum of 3 that's allowed on vacuum station number 1, and I build a house, I can't have one because they already got theirs installed. Correct? Yep, sorry. Okay. Anybody else?
Thank you, Betty. I didn't hear an answer to that earlier question as to how many buffer tanks can go onto a system. How is it regulated? To what extent? Is it per a section of the system, per a individual, what do you call it? Yeah, the individual.
There's a recommendation in our design manual that states that no more than 25% of the flow on any particular line should be from buffer tanks, and no more than 50% of the total flow should be from buffer tanks. So because of the tendency for the buffer tanks to accept establishments, commercial, high flow users. So you don't want to overwhelm the system, and that's the reason for that limitation on the buffer tanks.
Can you give us a general idea of what that means? I understand the 50% or 25%, but if you had a pit and an individual pit for an individual house, how many individual pits and individual houses could be in a row?
That's what they said they were going to have to determine based on our system, because we don't know the estimated flow to each of the vacuum stations, and it's different at each service area. So you may be able to have 20 buffer tanks on vacuum station number 7 and only 2 on vacuum station number 1. It depends on the total storage tank, the flow going to that vacuum station, et cetera. Am I correct?
Correct.
So that's what we're going to have to determine. And as we heard from everybody, the beachfront is going to have more flow. It's just going to have higher occupancy, higher peak. So it may be we have to, do we have to give all our buffer tanks to the beachfront?
And speaking of the buffer tanks, if you have a 26-room motel with a restaurant, I would assume they already have a buffer tank?
Yes.
Would all of your commercial districts that have extra capacity have to have buffer tanks?
Not necessarily.
Any motel?
I would say any motel, school.
Restaurant?
Pardon me. Yeah, any motel, any school, that's sort of a high flow user.
So buffer tanks, although you might not want to exclude them from residential, you certainly need to save as much of your buffer tank capacity for your commercial district.
I think that's a fair statement, yeah.
Yeah, I would think so too. The only other question I have, the design engineer mentioned in the tanks, I'm getting these terms mixed up, but in the tanks that they had, you had estimated in peak times 2.5 times for your capacity in peak, 2.5 times what amount?
It's the average daily wastewater flow is
Which
2.5 times that.
Okay, so the average daily would be 250 gallons, is that?
For a permanent residence, it was 250 gallons. Again, this is based on historical data from Yukon Beach. And a seasonal residence was 350 gallons, I believe.
Okay, so, and I believe you mentioned, David, at the two end houses, you had 700 gallons in a 4-hour period? Was that what I... So, 2 different houses, but you had one had 5 and 1 7, was that? Right, so...
Yes, there was a lot of flow.
Pardon me? Yeah, that was all right. So I guess that's my question when we talk about larger structures, is if the peak capacity was figured at 700 gallons for a beachfront, and we know that you figured 6.5 people for that peak capacity, and we also know that with 8 and 10 bedroom houses, and quite honestly, I have a 4-bedroom house, and as some of my neighbors will attest, we had 20 people in it one weekend. 24 people. 24 people in it one weekend. We have 3 bathrooms and 4 showers. So my guess is that we don't have enough capacity for that number of people in my house. And 10-bedroom houses and 8-bedroom houses are going to have a lot more people than that. I just don't think we have that capacity.
Oh, no, we definitely don't have the capacity. That's one thing that council's going to work with the manager and the wastewater, the utility director to see what we need to do to get that capacity. And Another point, you had mentioned that we based all these on the Yopon Beach system. And Yopon Beach, on the beachfront, you don't see many very large homes. You don't see many over 4 or 6 bedrooms. So that's what we're facing on the issue. We're going to have extra capacity, because in the beachfront on 58th and West, they're building much larger homes.
This is just to help you. You said 1,200 gallons between the two homes. The one thing that you didn't notice down there, they had drop houses outside also that they were using. So they had 2 porta-johns during this wedding. So obviously they didn't want them using the homes inside either.
Well, they got billed for their show. And I am washing all the white rock in my house. The house is 50 feet long. It goes out 10 to 12 feet in front of my house. I'm running that water, try to do it from the irrigation well, almost ran off the pump. I am paying for sewer for every gallon of water that I'm using to wash my white rock. Anybody else? Thank you, everybody that is here today, for coming to this meeting. I love seeing this amount of involvement and people wanting to know the information. And thank you to Matt and to Frank and to Denny for coming out again. And